Yeah, so let's dive into the obvious first option, the Kansas City Chiefs. They won the AFC West last year. They went to the Super Bowl, and everyone knows what happened in that game. They lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their offensive line was full of injuries, opt-outs, and backups. And they addressed it big time this offseason. Let me actually pull up the Google Doc real quick.
Or if you want, I can
Forgot
just
to
read
pull it
it
up.
and then
Yeah, go
come back
ahead.
to.
Go
All
ahead.
right, so they brought in, like John mentioned, guard Joe Thuney, got center Austin Blythe. They also traded for Orlando Brown. That was a big trade. Defensively, or sorry, let me stay on offense. Also, they drafted Creed Humphrey, who's a center from Oklahoma in the second round at 68. And then also they grabbed running back Jerick McKinnon via free agency. And then defensively, got defensive lineman Jaron Reed, who's a big reason why Chris Jones, I think they've been playing him at defensive end more this
Mhm.
season. So they're looking to do that. And then cornerback Mike Hughes, who I liked coming out in the draft, who's had ACL issues and things like that. And then linebacker Nick Bolton, who they drafted in the second round, who I also kind of like too as well. But yeah, you can go ahead.
Well, they also lost Eric Fisher and Mitchell
Oh, yeah.
Schwartz, two tackles. Like we said, they were both injured during the Super Bowl, and we saw what happened, but they did replace them pretty well. They lost Sammy Watkins, wide receiver. He signed with the Baltimore Ravens,
Yep.
right?
Baltimore.
They lost Bashad Breeland. I know you're not the biggest fan of him.
He's actually solid.
Uh,
Our friend Mitch is not a fan of him.
Yeah, I thought you were both not big fans of him. Anyway,
No.
and then they lost pair running backs, Damian Williams and Le'Veon Bell. Damian Williams had opted out last year, so they didn't really notice, losing him right now. And then Le'Veon Bell, we saw the offseason drama that revolved around him and Andy Reid. So I don't think the Chiefs are too upset about losing him either, especially with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in year two. So for me, I'm really scared about this Chiefs offseason, man. I think it was so obvious that if the Chiefs had their offensive line at full strength in that Super Bowl, that game could be completely different. Patrick Mahomes was running for his life, making some of the craziest throws I've ever witnessed, and it was hitting his receivers right in the hands and face, whatever, and they weren't catching it. And I just think that was a game to where that's not going to happen again. I don't think the Chiefs receivers are going to have a game like that because we've never really seen them struggle with drops, especially some of the catches that were as easy as the ones they should have made. And then with the emphasis they put on the offensive line, I don't think Andy Reid and the management the Chiefs have ever want to see over the next 10 years they have Patrick Mahomes, him having to run like that again, ever. And Orlando Brown, I was shocked they were able to make that trade because the Ravens, obviously, the Ravens and Chiefs have sort of been rivals the last few years as Lamar and Mahomes have both elevated to MVP status and two of the best teams in the AFC. So I was shocked that the Ravens were willing to trade Orlando Brown there. I think he's going to be a beast. He could be one of those guys in a few years, could be contending for one of those top 5 tackle spots. I don't think he's there yet, but he's got the potential to. Austin Blythe, a good center, solid option. They also get Laurent Dernay Tardif, right? That's how you pronounce his name.
Luvernay, Darnay Tardif. The
Luvernay,
doctor
yeah,
is what my
yeah. They're
stepdad,
getting
who's a
him
Chief fan,
back.
refers to him because
Yeah,
he's a doctor.
they're getting him back from the opt-out last year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reinforcement on the line. And then Joe Thuney from the Patriots. I mean, I think he was the highest paid offensive lineman in the offseason this year. And I mean, what an ad to have him and Orlando Brown now on the left side to anchor Patrick Mahomes' blind side. At this point, and also Creed Humphrey. I was super high on Creed Humphrey out of the draft. I thought he was one of the best interior offensive linemen, arguably the best center in the whole draft. So, man, at this point, I find it hard to see any other team but the Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl. But we'll get into that when we get to predictions later down the road. But Chow, how do you feel about their offseason ads?
So similar to you, I really I like the offensive line ads, obviously, but I like the fact too they got bigger on the offensive line. I mean, Orlando Brown is a 300+ pounder, and playing going from right tackle, but played left tackle last season while Staley was out. So that boosted his value, and that's one of the reasons why he asked for a trade. Obviously, I'm curious to see exactly what they do in terms of their starting 5 offensive linemen, because Tardif's a guard. The only really guy that's truly played tackle is Orlando Brown, so I'm not sure if they're going to kick, like I said, Duvernay Tardif out to tackle, and then have Creed Humphrey play guard, and then Blythe stay at center, and obviously Dooney's gonna stay at guard probably as well. So I'm not exactly sure. But regardless, I trust that they'll get their best five out there. Andy Reid's former offensive lineman, obviously offensive genius. So I assume he's going to get the five out there. I like the move, like I kind of mentioned too when you mentioned Jaron Reed. I liked how their D line by default got bigger. They lost some guys, but adding Jaron Reed to play D tackle and then moving Chris Jones to defensive end, I think is pretty good because Jones, obviously, as we know, great disruptor inside. And I think his blend of power and speed is going to be difficult for tackles. Guards and centers had issues with it. Now tackles and tight ends are going to have their hands full. As long as Frank Clark, who we'll see what happens with him, because I think that's a very key piece. That I think he's already. We'll see if he gets suspended or anything for his off the field stuff that happened this last season. One thing I am a little worried about is their defense, but their secondary. But it seems like as long they still have Honey Badger. Juan Thornhill has another year removed from his ACL injury, so he might be better this year too. And like we mentioned with the Seahawks, as long as the defense is at least average, they'll be fine because we know the offense is going to be good. It'll be interesting, keep an eye out both fantasy wise and just in general. This is a big year for McCole Hardman because, like John mentioned, Sammy Watkins is gone, and we're all assuming McCole takes that role as the number two because people forget too. Chiefs took McCole Hardman over DK Metcalf. Like, imagine if the Chiefs had DK Metcalf and Tyreek Hill right now. That would be wild. Granted, they value McCole for special teams and stuff like that. So, I expect this team to be back in the Super Bowl conversation because they have good coaching on top of obviously talent. I'm not going to be shocked I would be shocked if they don't win the AFC West crown this year. But I am interested to see if their offense adjusts to more of more I formation, not I formation, but Mahomes under center running the ball and doing some play action. Because like I mentioned in the last podcast, one of the few teams that are a spread offense primarily and are successful, but that's just because they have, like I just mentioned, they have the coaches with the creativity and obviously the weapons. But as we saw in the Super Bowl, they need a little more balance. We'll see if they can do that, have a better short game and run game this year. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that the offensive line and all the additions that they had for them, I think that a lot of people, ourselves included, obviously think that this was to protect Patrick Mahomes, but I think strategically they're looking towards Clyde Edwards-Helaire and saying, we drafted this guy in the first round. We want to use him. Like, we don't want this guy to be someone that, flashes off, in the first few weeks of the season, and then come playoff time, really, he doesn't make that big of an impact. I think that they beefed up this offensive line because I think they want to get him more involved. They obviously want to protect their investment in Patrick Mahomes, but you can further protect him by allowing your really good running back to do what he can do, and that's run the ball behind this massive offensive line now. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're going to move towards a little more balance, throwing in some I-form stuff, and obviously with Andy Reid, you can only imagine what kind of trick plays they're going to start running out of that sort of formation. So yeah, that's the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Right.
Real quick, I am very curious to see the role Jerick McKinnon plays because we saw in San Francisco. We've seen throughout his career, really. He's had really good moments. I think he's very well suited for the 2 role, not the 1 role that he's been forced to in times. So I'm interested to see if Reed maybe uses him as a slot receiver where it has like some double running back sets. That'll be very interesting to see.
Oh, they're absolutely going to use him in some sort of creative way. I think that's what they wanted out of Le'Veon Bell, but Le'Veon Bell doesn't necessarily have like the speed to do what I think they wanted. Jerick McKinnon, I think he fits more in that sort of slot mold as a running back because he can, outrun a lot of corners. So
great one cut back.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move into the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost said Oakland, still doing that a year later. But the Las Vegas Raiders finished 8-8 last year. Shout out to our friend Mike, big Raiders fan. They had a pretty busy offseason. They signed one of the bigger names who got traded to the Ravens last year, Yannick Ngakoue. The Ravens elected not to keep him, and he got big money in Las Vegas. They also signed former top 3 selection Solomon Thomas. They signed Casey Hayward, big corner, veteran who used to play for the Chargers and Broncos. Signed safety Carl Joseph, center Nick Martin, wide receiver John Brown, wide receiver Willie Snead, running back Kenyon Drake. And that's interesting because they already have Josh Jacobs. They reunite the Alabama running backs. And in the draft, they did what they tend to do. It wasn't as bad as previous years, but in the first round, I think they reached a little bit. They got offensive tackle Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama. A lot of people had him graded as a second-round guy, went the first to the Raiders. But the second round, they took a guy that I was very high on. I really wanted the Cowboys to get safety Trevon Moehrig out of TCU. The one thing I will say about Trevon Moehrig, and I was a little bit surprised about, is obviously they drafted him, but then they drafted another safety later in the draft. I can't remember his name. And they signed Carl Joseph. So they added 3 safeties in this offseason that led to my boy Jeff Heath getting cut. But I was a little surprised because they also have Jonathan Abrams. Maybe this means they're not necessarily sold on Abrams being their long-term option. But they really addressed the safety position pretty heavily in this offseason.
Yeah, but I have other safety was Divine Diablo from Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were pretty high on him as one of those day 3, maybe fringe day 2 picks. And so I was pretty surprised at how many safeties they acquired this offseason. But that being said, they did lose a few. They lost safety Jeff Heath, like I mentioned, former Cowboy. They also lost safety LaMarcus Joyner. They lost guard Gabe Jackson, wide receiver Tyrell Williams, center Rodney Hudson. That was a big one because Rodney has been there for a very long time, and he went to the Cardinals. And then also tackled Trent Brown. The most surprising part to me out of those losses is 3 of their starting offensive linemen all gone, especially Trent Brown, who they paid a lot of money to be there last year. But Chow, I'll give it to you first. How do you feel about the Raiders offseason?
So obviously I like the Yannick Ngakoue move. It's a move that we kind of alluded to last season. Needed a difference maker on the edge because Clone Furrow was not it, and I think Max Crosby is solid, but he's still not. He's still not a premier edge rush or just pass rusher in general. I think he's a really good one though, and maybe he can further develop. But yeah, I like Ngakoue, and I also like taking a shot on Solomon Thomas. Maybe they can get. I think do they still have your old D line coach? I'm forgetting his name.
Rod Marinelli.
Yeah, they still got because Rod always gets. He always knows how. If Rod can't get talent out of you, get production out of you, then you're just SOL. Yeah, I mean that's a nice way to put it. But yeah, so hopefully Solomon can maybe revive his career a little bit there. Obviously, Casey Hayward, former Packer, former Charger. I was hoping for a reunion so that we wouldn't have to use
Bronco. I meant Packer.
That's okay. I was hoping for a reunion personally, so we wouldn't have to waste a first round pick on a corner. But it is what it is. But he went to obviously Las Vegas. I almost said Oakland there. Carl Joseph, like we mentioned, bounced around a bit. But I mean, you mentioned they did lose some linemen. I mean, they brought in Nick Martin, got Alex Leatherwood, who I assume is going to be on the right side. And, maybe John Gruden's got, some other guys to fill in, at the other spots. Like we mentioned before, offensive line, defensive line, it's tough to assess like who the organization likes because these guys come up the ranks and stuff. But I do like the Kenyon Drake addition as much as I love Josh Jacobs. I think maybe due to the poor offensive line play last year, maybe it's just attrition, but really couldn't stay healthy last season. Fully healthy. It's really been an issue for most of his first 2 years as someone who's owned him both years in fantasy. And I like the addition of Kenyon Drake to be the change of pace / probably primary third down back to preserve also, Josh going forward. Because obviously, having all these injuries so soon is not a great look. Not a great look, but concerning if I was, front office. I'm still worried about the wide receivers. I mean, I know they have Darren Waller, the baller. That's fine, but we got to see, Henry Ruggs, who I was high on last year. Didn't have a great year, but had a couple moments here and there. Yeah, maybe now with an off season, he can be better. He can be Derek's number 1 guy. And other than that, though, I mean, we'll see if Gruden's creativity and can maximize John Brown, Willie Snead. But I feel like neither John Brown nor Willie Snead are a good number 2. Oh, they do have Hunter Renfrow, but he's more of a slot guy.
Yeah.
So maybe not as bad.
He's cooking Jalen Ramsey, apparently, you know?
Hey, but I haven't seen any videos. So, which I mean, I wouldn't doubt. I mean, it's preseason, but regardless, um, my only concern with the Las Vegas Raiders is I believe they're switching. They're going to be running that Seattle scheme again, and the line. And once again, like you mentioned before, after the front four, you really need solid linebacker play, and not really impressed with other linebackers. I forgot who they signed last year from the Rams, but he didn't have. I think it was Dre Greenlaw. I think he's from the 49ers, actually.
They got a Corey Littleton.
Corey Littleton, that's who it was. Sorry, not Dre Greenlaw. Corey Littleton, I think they gave him a good amount of money. He wasn't, their premier middle linebacker, I felt, last year. I remember, I think in our mocks, I had them getting a linebacker. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Maybe Gruden's got a linebacker that, has been rising through the ranks, a late day draft pick that's been developing. But otherwise, last year they ended 8-8. If I had to say win range-ish, I would say 9-10 wins is going to be the Raiders' limit, and that's more just because the division's going to be better too. I think the Raiders did get a little bit better, but not monumentally better that I can say with confidence that they win the AFC West.
Yeah, on the wide receiver thing real quick that you brought up, I don't know if you've heard about Bryan Edwards. You heard any reports about him?
Apparently he's tearing it up in camp.
Yeah,
right?
I've heard I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was some reporter. It was Gruden himself. But the way that I heard them describe it was he was basically like Randy Moss and Terrell Owens combined. That was what they were calling him, which I thought was utterly ridiculous. Now, maybe this guy is the second coming of those two, and we'll all eat our words. But I just thought it was absolutely absurd that was like the headline that was coming out of Raiders camp, is that Bryan Edwards is this mix of two of the top 5 receivers of all time, debatably, if some people don't want to have him in there. Anyway, so I have similar concerns as you. I like Derek Carr, but to this day, I still just don't know how committed Gruden is to him. It always feels like every year is the year that Gruden's going to get rid of him. But Derek Carr seems to think otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, he's still there. He still sounds like he's committed. I do like the Kenyon Drake move, like you talked about with Josh Jacobs and the injury history. But also I think that Josh Jacobs isn't amazing in the passing game. And so I think Kenyon Drake gives them an upgrade there, and also just gives them the ability to not use Jacobs as so much of a workhorse, because when he was healthy, they run him into the ground. But he doesn't necessarily produce like, a Derrick Henry. So, it's at some point, like all those, hits that he's taken is going to take a lot of toll on his body. So I like getting Kenyon Drake. I think that keeps Josh Jacobs healthy for the year and elongates his career. Receivers, like you said, it's just not a deep group when Henry Ruggs is really your best option. He's so incredibly unproven. I just don't know. I mean, obviously Darren Waller, he's the number one option passing wise on the team, but it just feels so limited. Like if Ruggs doesn't really pop this year, say he has a similar year to like Hollywood Brown, right? Another guy who's really fast, taken in the first round, hasn't necessarily proven much yet. If he has a year similar to like Hollywood's had so far, I don't know how much better this Raiders offense can realistically get, because people can just focus on the run game and stopping Darren Waller, and the receivers aren't really going to pose that much of a threat. But who knows? Maybe Bryan Edwards is that good, and he'll assert himself as the true alpha. The offensive line, I think they got worse overall. Andre James is now their center, at least from the predicted depth chart. They still have Richie Incognito, but he's getting older. Colton Miller. Yeah, Colton Miller's their starting left tackle. He hasn't necessarily been amazing. He's not bad, but not amazing. He's still young, so there's time to improve. But the right side, Denzel Good at right guard. Honestly, have no clue who Denzel Good is.
I think,
and then Alex Leatherwood at right tackle, who he was good, but I think there was issues because in the SEC, there's obviously a lot of really good pass rushers. There was some times to where it just felt like his footwork was really off, and he's really big, but he didn't necessarily play to his size on the offensive line. Just allowed some of those like smaller, fast guys like Azeez Ojulari, who played at Georgia, just run right by him. And so I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I say this every year about the Raiders, but maybe Gruden just knows more than we do, and he's finding these diamonds in the rough. But at least so far, Clean Farrell, Damon Arnett, some of these picks that he's had in the first rounds, I just haven't been super impressed with. So I don't know. They also signed Gerald McCoy, veteran defensive tackle. It's all good. I mean, he's coming off a pretty big injury and he's old, so who knows how much of a impact he's going to make. But overall, their defense, I don't know if they have like a huge difference maker. I think Yannick Ngakoue is good, but I think he peaked in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I believe so too. But I still think he can be a solid pass rusher. But
yeah.
Well, regardless, outside of him, not many other difference makers as of yet. Now I know that we complimented their young secondary last year. Maybe they take a step forward with with an elongated with an actual off season this year. But we'll see.
And I mean, they did add Trevon Moehrig, who, like I said, I'm super high on. I don't know how you feel about him, but I mean, he could be that difference maker they need in the secondary.
I felt he was average coming out, like not bad. I mean, obviously, an average NFL safety is a really good player.
Right.
I felt like that's what he could be. I didn't see crazy difference maker. Like I don't see top 5 safety in his future, but I could be wrong.
All right, well, we'll see. Anyway, next in the division, the LA Chargers, a team they got a lot of hype building up around him. I think it's because obviously Justin Herbert lit up the league last year, had a monster rookie season. Austin Eckler is returning from injury. They hired defensive coordinator Brandon Staley to be their new head coach. And obviously he was the architect of the Rams top defense last year. And we're going to see what he can do with the Chargers. Just real quick, the additions, they added a guy who, you know very well, center Corey Linsley, much needed addition to their offensive line. They also added tackle Matt Feeler. Once again, offensive line was a big issue. They had one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year. They added tight end Jared Cook to replace tight end Hunter Henry, who left. In the draft, they got guard Rashawn Slater. But the thing with him is he's versatile, so he can play guard, he can play tackle. He has the size, the athleticism to try out both. I think we both agree that he'd probably be better suited at guard, and I think that's probably where he's going to play to start off his career. But once again, offensive line was so putrid last year. You have Justin Herbert. You got to applaud them for going out and making moves to and then in the second round, they went out and got cornerback Asante Samuel Jr., pretty undersized guy, but he did have an interception in the preseason so far. So who knows? Maybe he'll make it work. And his dad, Asante Samuel, also an undersized corner, but the guy's a Hall of Famer. And we saw, we're seeing a lot of Hall of Fame DB sons coming into the league last year. Antoine Winfield Jr. obviously won the Super Bowl this year. So maybe Asante Samuel Jr., he's one of the, next greats, sort of like Antoine Winfield Jr. looked like he was last year. For the losses, we mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Joey Bosa, but they lost edge rusher Melvin Ingram, a guy who's been there for a very long time. They lost cornerback Casey Hayward. They lost linebacker Denzel Perryman. Once again, these guys have been with the Chargers defense for quite a while. Linebacker Nick Vigil, guard Trey Turner, center Mike Pouncey, which real quick actually about Trey Turner, that one was a little surprising because they traded for him last offseason. But then center Mike Pouncey, tight end Hunter Henry, like I said, he went to the Patriots, and then QB Tyrod Taylor. That one was not surprising after, what happened with Justin Herbert and the punctured lung and all that kind of stuff. So Chow, I'm going to turn it over to you once again. How do you feel about the Chargers offseason, and how do you feel about them moving forward into this season? Because I know a lot of people are very high on the Chargers potentially being a team that can improve.
Yeah, my only worries with the Chargers, I'm worried about the other spot opposite of Joey Bosa. I know they have, I think, Uchenna Wosu, who's going to be taking that role of Melvin Ingram. And I'm not sure what I should have looked into it more, but I'm not sure, like, did Melvin Ingram want more money, or if he's just done in LA? Because I feel like even at this age, he would have been still have been solid to keep around. Because
still a free agent.
Really? I thought he signed somewhere. But regardless, I'm worried about their depth for the D-line. I know they haven't had across the board. I mean, after Joey Bosa, I think Jerry Tillery was their first-round pick a couple of years ago, and I forget they're their defensive lineman. Did they get Linval Joseph? I'm forgetting. They got a big boy that I wanted last year. But otherwise, I mean, after that, and then Kenneth Murray, who had a solid rookie year. I think they
did get him, by the way.
Linval Joseph.
They got Linval Joseph.
I knew they did. I wanted him last offseason, but we didn't get him because Green Bay doesn't do that. But anyway, on the Chargers, So I'm sure that's why they let go of Denzel Perryman, who had injury issues, and Nick Vigil. I'm curious to see how different the defense, if it's going to be more creative. And I'm also curious to see their cornerback room, because I think they still have Chris Harris Jr., probably why they let go of Casey Hayward. But I mean, it was real close between the two of them in terms of performance last year. And then I think they also have another solid corner who I'm forgetting. I think Mike Davis, who's been solid. But after that, I mean, we'll see if Asante Samuel will be the third guy to step in. Also, Derwin James coming back. He's looked, at least from video, once again, it's a video, it's preseason, it's practice, looks solid. And that one, pick six he got on Jimmy G last week. So yeah, as long as he's back and everyone else is healthy, once again, my only worry is this team's depth. This team always seems to get bit by the injury bug very early in the season. I'm gonna knock on wood for you Charger fans. So I'm interested to see that. Then offensively, I don't see many concerns. Obviously, Corey Linsley's an upgrade, and then obviously they got two more linemen via free agency in the draft. So yeah, I'm excited to see this offense. Also, I felt hopefully Justin Herbert gets more unleashed, gets more freedom. I think that might be a big complaint last year. Was Anthony Lynn just loved to run the ball first, second down, and then all right, now you have to throw it because it's 3rd and 8, and we didn't, because we ran the ball even though we have a terrible offensive line. So yeah, I'm curious to see that because I think Eckler said that he's going to be playing an Alvin Kamara-ish role. I forget who they have there. I think their OC's from the Saints. So I think it was Joe Lombardi, I want to say. Could be wrong.
I think so.
So yeah, I'm very curious to see how much more creative they get with their offense with Mike Williams too and Keenan Allen and obviously Jared Cook. So honestly, I feel better about this team, at least upside wise, than the Chargers. But it wouldn't shock me if this team ends up being 6-11 because injuries have happened. A lot of new turnover, a lot of just coaching changes. Philosophy changes on both sides of the ball, especially offensively. I'm afraid that could factor into with the LA Chargers, and once again, tough division to be in as well. But I don't expect a fall off from Justin Herbert, just to put that out there. I think he'll still be balling and doing well.
Yeah, real quick on injuries. They, if you look at their preseason depth chart as of right now, they have 11 people who are questionable. Nobody who's hugely
Notable.
injured right now, but they do have notable names who are questionable. I'm just saying no one's out right now, but like Mike Williams, Kenneth Murray, Corey Linsley,
Mike
Rashawn
Williams,
Slater,
another guy who's always just dealt with injuries that have always stopped his momentum, and he'll have a few good games and he'll get an injury, and then it's so.
Yeah, so let's hope the Chargers don't have injuries because the last few years they've just been decimated by them for a long time. Overall, yeah, I largely agree with you. I think the Chargers overall as a team should improve. My main concern, which I don't know how to feel about this because that I'm a big believer in Justin Herbert, but last year, and this is according to Pro Football Focus, his passing grade under pressure led the NFL. And his passer rating under pressure was actually better than his passer rating from a clean pocket, which is very surprising that he performed better when he was under siege.
A lot of that skill.
Yeah, and a lot of that is his offensive line was terrible. So Pro Football Focus actually graded his offensive line as the 30th best in the league. So they're just terrible, and those numbers just they do not seem sustainable to me. I think I saw somewhere and it was comparing a list of legendary quarterbacks and the years where they were elite under pressure and then the following years, and there tends to be a very large drop off. Now, I don't know. I don't know if there's a correlation between maybe their offensive linemen got worse, maybe they had a tougher schedule, what the factors are that could potentially go into that. But I think naturally those numbers have to go down because his passer rating under pressure was a 97.7. I don't think he's going to lead the league in, passer or what was it? His passing grade. Yeah, his passer grade under pressure. So I think those will go down, but at the same time, their offensive line got better. So I think it sort of maybe balances out. But part of me does worry that maybe he won't have the same year he did last year because he set the bar pretty high. And who knows? Once again, the Chargers, they have a lot of injuries. And so you never know who's going to be healthy for that team and that offense. Defensively, also their defense last year wasn't amazing. I think, getting Derwin James back, and adding Asante Samuel Jr., Kenneth Murray getting a full year, and all those kind of things are great, but I just don't know how much this defensive unit does improve outside of the Derwin James addition. So yeah, also Chris Harris, he's getting up there in age, so one has to wonder how much longer he can play at a really high level. But overall, yeah, I think I agree with you. I could see this team improving. I could see them being second in the division, but I also think they have an incredibly low floor because of injuries, because of a new coaching staff. I think that's an underrated thing. Sometimes when you transition to a new coaching staff, there's some bumps in the road and you never know how it's going to work. So yeah, overall, I just don't really know where to feel with this team yet. And I think as we get closer to the season, maybe I'll have made up my mind.
Yeah, real quick, before we move on, I always feel, I don't know what, I should probably look back and see. They always start off bad because they blow 2 or 3 games in the first few weeks.
Yep.
They'll have they missed a field goal, a gimme field goal to win the game, or they missed an extra point and then they have to go for 2, and then they didn't get the 2, and all of a sudden they're 1-3, with their backs up against the wall. And it doesn't matter. You can't say, oh, it's the head coach, it's just It's literally it's been that way since for the past 4 or 5 years, I feel like. And I know because, obviously, I mentioned my stepdad's a Chief fan. We ended up watching the Charger games because they always get the afternoon games, pretty much the whole year, at least for Central Time. That's afternoon games. So, yeah. But, all right, let's get, I'm going to move us on to the Denver Broncos, our last team here. They were at bottom of the division. But they had a solid record, 5-11. Had a lot of ads this offseason, which we'll get into in a second. But in terms of additions, traded for quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, added tackle Bobby Massey from the Bears. Also really went heavy in corners this offseason. Brought in Kyle Fuller from the Bears, who was formerly under Vic Fangio. Also Ronald Darby from the Eagles. They brought in. And then, like we mentioned in other podcasts, and I'm sure as most people know, first-round pick, grabbed Patrick Surtain at number 9, who I had as my number 2 safety, cornerback, John's favorite cornerback in the draft. And then also second round, grabbed running back Javonte Williams, who's looked pretty good this preseason. If I had to re-rank my running backs, I think I would put him over Michael Carter right now. He's been more impressive. And then, obviously, I didn't know much about the center, but center Quinn Miners, he's from a smaller school, but he was a 3rd-round pick, and a lot of people were high on him. And then a guy I liked, linebacker Baron Browning in the 3rd round at pick 105, is also who they added. And then just over the losses, main losses were just Jarrell Casey, AJ Bouye, and then obviously tackle Juwan James. What happened with him? He tore his ACL on a private, not working out the facility. That's why I mentioned Bobby Massey. All right, John. I guess first of all, who do you think is going to win this quarterback competition between Bridgewater and Locke? It's one of the close ones. That's one I'm willing to talk about. And then also, how do you feel about this Denver team this year?
Man, Denver's a weird team because last year I picked them to make the playoffs as the last wild card spot, the 7th seed, and they didn't make it. They had a pretty bad year, but there was also just a lot of injuries. I think they have a lot of talent. And I have to give a lot of credit to their GM because I think he's done a really good job drafting over the last few years. I mean, sort of underrated picks like Bradley Chubb, right? Because they haven't really been a good team while he's been there, but he's a really good player. And I loved Patrick Surtain, as you know. He had that pick 6 in his first preseason game against the Vikings, just snagged it and took it to the house. So yeah, I mean, the Broncos are weird. I like the talent they have. I'll start with the QB because I think that's easier for me. I think Drew Lock's going to win it. And the reason I think that, and this is what I think I tend to do for most quarterback competitions, and I think this is what a lot of NFL teams do as well, is that it's easier to go with the guy who had the job previously and then make a switch if he sucks than it is to make the switch now and then try to reverse it and go back to the guy who had it previously. Also, Drew Lock's just younger, so I think the Broncos want to give him every opportunity to become a franchise quarterback. Now, I don't know if I'm not a Broncos fan, so I'm not super tuned into what he's been looking like throughout training camp and preseason, and the battle between him and Teddy Bridgewater. But I just, the one thing I do know is that Teddy Bridgewater, you really know what you're going to get out of him. He's a game manager. He's not going to take a lot of risks. He's going to play very conservative. And I think that with the defense they do have, if everybody can stay healthy, it's not a bad option. I mean, they have Justin Simmons. They have Kareem Jackson at safety. Their corners are stacked with Surtain, Kyle Fuller, and Bryce Callahan, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. Like, they have a lot of talent on that defense. And so maybe you just run it a lot with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. You throw some passes, some dinks and dunks to Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton. But I think they're going to start Drew Lock because I feel like he's sort of the opposite of Teddy Bridgewater. Like, he's willing to unleash it deep, take the risks, try to make a play. And for a team who has to deal with the Chiefs in their division, I think just trying to play it safe just isn't the way to go right now. I mean, if you had, an elite level quarterback on your team, and you want to, try to trust your defense and allow your quarterback to make some plays and choose when to pick his moments, then I get it. But I just don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is the kind of guy that's going to do that. So I think Drew Lock's going to win the quarterback battle. And then if he's just bad, then maybe they make a switch to Teddy Bridgewater like 6-7 weeks in. Also I really hope for my case he does, because I have Cortland Sutton in this only fantasy league I've done so far. And I just believe with a guy of his stature, he's more likely to do better with Drew Lock than he would Teddy Bridgewater. And then how do they do on the year?
Or just how do you feel about their team this year? Do you think because I think you're already alluding to the fact, I'm guessing you, like me, where I'll mention in a second, but you feel like they'll be a competitive team for sure. It's just,
yeah, it just comes down to quarterback play. And I know we haven't covered the NFC East yet, but they feel similar to like the Giants, right? Like, they have talent, they have pieces, but I just don't know how good they're going to, like, what their ceiling is going to be or what their floor is going to be because of their QB. And having a bad QB, it just makes all of your other holes come to light. And so I think they have a really low floor, but I still think they have the ceiling of being second in this division. If Drew Lock can fix some of the turnover issues and be what people thought he was going to be after that first year. I think if he can show internal development, then I could see them finish second in the division. If like the other two teams don't go out and get 10 wins, like I could see them getting like 8-9 wins, but that's sort of where I'm capping them, because once again the quarterback play.
Yeah, I feel like that's just like the main topic of conversation for the Denver Broncos is like, and I'm with you obviously as a pro Drew Lock person. Excuse me, and he looked solid in the preseason, and he worked with Peyton Manning in the offseason, and I'm assuming that was to, Peyton probably told him, hey, take the check downs, dummy. You don't have to go 20 yards every time downfield.
Especially, which I will add to, especially, sorry to interrupt you, but especially this year where Cortland Sutton's going to be healthy. You have Noah Fant, you have Jerry Jeudy, who should improve. You've added Javonte Williams. Like, I think last year you can cut him some slack because they just had so many injuries that this year, I think,
too.
Yeah, no offseason. That I think this year, I think he should improve, but there's just less excuse if he doesn't because of the better surroundings, basically.
Yeah, but and so yeah, if I were the coach or GM, I would play Drew Lock, because like John mentioned, there's a higher upside. There's the fact that Drew, there's a chance that Drew has grown, has fully grown, not fully, but has grown. It's going to take the check down, stop making so many bonehead mistakes or force things. And especially with the weapons they have, I mean, I feel like John mentioned, also KJ Hamler's had a really good preseason, and also had a good end of last season too when he finally got healthy. And then Cortland Sutton the year before that was one of Drew Lock's favorite targets.
But a beast that year.
But if I had a gun to my head, got to put money on it, I think it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater, just because Vic Fangio, it's his third. He's kind of on the hot seat, It's surprising because no one's talking about really John Gruden being on the hot seat, but that's a different story.
Well, Gruden also had like a 10-year contract they signed him to.
Yeah. But I mean, because the new GM they brought in, which is George Patton, like John mentioned, this may be a 1-year, audition, and I just don't think, especially a defensive coach like Vic Fangio, I think, once again, gun to my head, I think he's going to go with the guy that can take care of the ball, and Vic, can just rely on his defense, run the ball, the old school kind of mentality. But like I mentioned, if I was a coach or GM, I would have, like John, go Drew Lock. And it wouldn't shock me if they do go Drew Lock. But if they do go Drew Lock, I think he will definitely be on a short leash. I don't think he'll be. I think it's like 3 or 4 week if he's not, because like I said, Vic Fangio is on the hot seat. So if things aren't pretty the first 2-3 weeks, I think he's going to make the decision very quickly to go Teddy. And also the fact that everyone loves Teddy Bridgewater because his story, his injury and everything. I mean, how could you not? So
I'm going to pull up their schedule real quick because now I'm interested to see who they play right off the bat.
Yeah, that'll be good. That's always good.
Okay. Well, I mean, if Drew Lock can't perform in these games, then okay, week 1, you got the Giants. That's a good defense.
That's a good defense, though.
So that one's tough. But after that, you have the Jaguars and the Jets. Okay. Both of those games, I think.
They should be 2-1.
You can perform. Yeah, in theory, they should win those games. Now, the tough part after that is you got the Ravens and the Steelers. Oof. So, I mean, you got a mix. You got some tough games. You got some easy games. But then you got the Raiders. I think that's a winnable game because their defense isn't amazing. And Drew Lock, he has a chance to perform. But then they go to the Browns and Washington. But then they go to the Cowboys and the Eagles. So, like, they go from, like, these really hard defenses to, like, really easy defenses. So, I don't know.
It's tough.
I don't know.
I honestly, that's why I think it's going to be the first 2-3 weeks. Like if he's struggling, if Drew Lock's still forcing the issue, I think in week 2, I'll be surprised mid game. Hey, we're going with Teddy, and then give Teddy game 3 to week 3 to get more acclimated being the starting quarterback again, and then just roll from there and take care of the ball, especially with those defenses that they have lined up. But yeah, for sure we'll get an answer to see if and especially me as someone who's a Drew Lock fan who's very high in him coming out of the draft, we'll get an answer, or especially I will, to see if if Drew belongs or if this is it for Drew and the Broncos. But
I want to say real quick too, I think any quarterback that's sort of in this situation, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, all these kind of guys, they need to be thanking Josh Allen for the massive improvement that he made, because now I think every GM in the back of their mind is going to think, what if he makes the jump like Josh Allen did? Now, obviously,
or Ryan Tannehill. I think Tannehill deserves to be in that thing because he wasn't utilized correctly in Miami, and then all of a sudden he goes to Tennessee and he's a solid QB.
So now I think quarterbacks should thank Tannehill and Josh Allen. Josh Allen for the improvement, but Tannehill for the GM may be thinking, well, maybe it's just the coach, because obviously in Miami it was the coach. In Tennessee, look at Tannehill's numbers now. Yeah. Drew Lock, I don't know how big of a leash he'll have, but like I said, if he can't get it done in the Jacksonville and the Jets game, then I mean, at that point, you got to do what you got to do, because the Steelers, the Ravens, Washington, like that, it's tough.
Yeah. So hopefully for my sake, since I'm Drew Lock fan, he balls out and secures that job. But yeah.
And Cortland Sutton becomes a top 10 fantasy receiver.
Yes.
Come on, Drew.
Yeah, Drew's got no excuse.
Do it for the boys.
Well, I feel like he would too, just by his demeanor. He's doing the dances.
Totally would.
But regardless, so that's gonna wrap up this episode. That was the AFC West. What's today? Tuesday. So we'll probably be back this weekend. We'll probably hit. We'll hit the NFC North. I gotta hit. I forgot to mention to you, John, and I'll mention it to them. Might get a person or two for the NFC East one, because we know so many people. So, but we'll see. But regardless, next episode will be NFC North for sure. We might do both NFC and AFC North. I'll get with John on that, and obviously, y'all will see on the title and stuff. But regardless, if everyone could, thank you everyone for your continued support. Please keep showing it. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Once again, our Instagram, which has been popping off. Thanks to John, and thanks to, I guess, my rankings too. At Shut Up the Ball Pod.
The controversy.
It's just the way it's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. It's just how I would rank them. But anyway, and then obviously we have a TikTok at Shut Up and Ball. John's been doing reels, also on YouTube and such as well. And then also we have a Facebook page, which is just Shut Up and Ball, and Twitter, which is just at Shut Up and Ball. But hope everyone enjoys their week. We'll probably be talking to y'all, like I said, during the weekend. So we'll probably be starting. Some preseason games will be starting and such. Hopefully, if you're drafting fantasy-wise too, hopefully the people you draft, knocking on wood for everybody, don't get injured 30 minutes afterwards or retire. Because I forgot today marks the 2-year anniversary of Andrew Luck retiring suddenly. And I remember I was in a draft that day, and someone literally drafted Luck, and the news released like 10 minutes later, and we didn't tell him. So, enjoy your week, everybody. Get through the work week. I know I will be trying to. We're almost there to football, people. I think today's the 24th. We're a little over 2 weeks away. So hang in there. We're almost there, everybody. But have a nice night.